Our goals for today is to really learn more about the activity matrix and the visual daily schedule so that we can help our family structure the homeschool experience, and to understand how the activity matrix is a tool that can support the implementation of the evidence-based practice naturalistic intervention. Look at various types of visual daily schedules so that when we design them, they're most effective. And then we'll have lots of resources and tools to support you as you go forth with this information. This is what an activity matrix may look like. I just wanted to give you a visual. We will look at this in more depth in a few minutes, but just notice that across the top we have the goal area, academics in this case, communication, social skills, independence, and fine motor. And then down the left-hand side is that schedule. And that's why today we're talking about visual daily schedules and the activity matrix, because in order to make an activity matrix, you have to have a schedule. So the first thing we want to do, and it's very, very helpful for me, especially as the presenter today, is to learn a little bit more about your understanding of familiarity with the activity matrix. And so we have our first poll, which will be what is your experience with using an activity matrix for instructional planning? Oh, you guys are fast. Have you developed and used one? Have you just used one, or you've just never even used an activity matrix? Okay, I see them stopped moving a little bit, so I'm going to end the polling, and now I'm going to share our results with everybody. So it looks like not everyone has developed and used one. Several of you have actually used an activity matrix, and almost half of you, I believe, have never used an activity matrix before. Let's do one more poll that we have. Let's see, I gotta stop the share of those results and go to my second poll. I'm reverbalizing in case you guys haven't noticed. We're going to launch this poll. Does your IEP team use a specific tool to support collaboration when you're developing IEP goals for students with ASD? And I think this means other than the format of an IEP where we're all filling in those required pieces. Do you always use a specific tool to help guide all those multi-member teams? Sometimes you have a tool that helps coordinate your work. You rarely use a tool that integrates and collaborates with your team, or you never use a tool. You just, everybody writes their IEP goals, turns it into the case manager, and then we do it. I'm going to go ahead and end the polling, and I'm going to share the results with you. So there we go. So not always. So about a third of you sometimes use a tool to coordinate your work. Many of you rarely use a tool, and many of you, 33%, never use a tool. Well, today we're going to talk about the activity matrix. Oh, I'm not clicking. Stop my share and reopen it. Okay. Why do we use an activity matrix? Well, one reason is it's actually a tool that supports the implementation of the evidence-based practice, naturalistic intervention. It's a tool that really helps us maximize the learning time and the effectiveness of instruction. What we're doing is we're planning for our teaching to occur throughout all activities of the day, all of the routines, and all of the transitions. A very helpful tip when you're talking to your teams and your family is to remind everyone that students with autism tend to learn rotely. So teaching within the natural context actually supports the needed opportunities to generalize the information that we're teaching them. So what are some other reasons that we use the activity matrix? It really is an effective way to organize teaching and learning opportunities. And it really gives us a structure to help us align our students' learning goals and objectives in the activity. You know, many times if we're just looking in the school, we have bell schedules and we have activities that are just going to happen. It's reading time or math time, and oh, we're going to do this. This really has us look specifically at designing activities for the IEP goal instead of the reverse. And the activity matrix, we all need visual supports, and it provides us with this visual structure. It's a reminder of what all the learning objectives are for our students. And I think you're all familiar that the IEPs of our students with autism, they're often several pages, and there are, you know, up to, 10 or 15 IEP goals. And that would be a miracle if any of us could remember the 8 to 10 IEP goals of every single student for which we're supporting in our program. And so this tool gives us a reminder and a visual support. This student is working on these goals within these activities. So let's take a look at this example here of just a sample activity matrix. We can see on the left-hand side, the first thing we're going to do on the day is review the daily schedule. And we have the time set for 9 to 9:30. And you might say, wow, that's 30 minutes. That's a really long time. However, it's just sufficient amount of time for us to infuse our IEP goals. So if we look at academics during our reviewing of the schedule, we're actually working on reading. We're going to have the student read the words on the schedule. And as you know, many of our students with autism are hyperlexic, meaning they can read anything, but they often don't have the comprehension behind what they've read. And so having these words on the schedule for what they're going to do in the natural context helps build that reading comprehension. So just in reviewing the schedule, we have that the student is actually going to read the words. We can even work on math just on this opening activity, that they're going to read the times on the schedule. And so that could be an IEP goal, is to tell time. When we look at the goal area of communication, we're going to work with our speech language pathologist. And this particular case, the question would be, tell me what you want to do today. And so what we do is we have a verbal prompt that needs to be processed by the student with autism, and that is helping them be able to communicate to you expressively, I want to do this. When we look at the social skills, we want them to request help using 2 words like help please, because maybe they might not be able to read all the words on the schedule. And when they get stuck, we're going to have a functional communication opportunity there. So, help please, I don't know what that word means. When we look under the goal area of independence, which is really important, we're going to maybe in this case for this student, build the order of the daily schedule. So we're teaching that student some self-management skills to teach them how to, I want to do this, this, and this. Those are those self-determination and those self-advocacy skills that we need to build from the very beginning so that they're successful when they finish in our school system. And then when you look at the goal area for fine motor, what we see is that the OT wants us to work on the pincer grasp. So instead of doing a decontextualized activity to work on pincer grasp, we actually have the perfect opportunity where they're going to grab that little, Velcro picture symbol and take it off or put it on. And so you can see, just reviewing the schedule, what we do is we have infused many, many IEP goals within that naturalistic context. Let's go through one more row. We'll look at reading. That's going to happen between 9:30 and 10. So, of course, we're going to have reading, and the activity is to read a story to the student. And the student is going to sequence, 3 pictures as to the beginning, middle, and end of the story. So that's going to be our reading activity during story. However, we do have communication goals that are going to happen here. And we've collaborated with our speech language pathologist. And we're going to ask them, which book do you want to read? So now they're processing language. And that's also working on critical processing skills. They have to think about, do I want to do this or this? Comparing and contrasting, and then they have to verbally respond, whether they're going to use an AAC device or gestures or simply use language. I want to read. In this case, the speech language pathologist says, I want to read, and then they can name the book. So we have a whole lot of communication and critical thinking going on here. When we look at social skills here, They're going to actually take turns turning the pages, and that they're going to have to wait for their turn. So the parent might turn the page one time, and then the child has to wait next. When we look at the goal area for independence, they're going to return that book to the bookshelf and not just leave it there and then we're done. So we're teaching those independent skills. And then once again, our OT has given us suggestions that during this, there's that pincer grasp to kind of open the book, to turn to the right page, to close and open and turn pages. And so again, you can see how just reading isn't just about reading, but we've infused communication, social skills, independence, and fine motor. And I won't belabor the point and go through each one of these, but I think it's important for us to understand that the naturalistic instruction will really help comprehension and actually applying the things we're teaching them into real life. Now, this one was put in here on purpose to show you this is a triple LUTs. And so we'd like to recommend that perhaps this would be a good place to start. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But this is one just as an example of that it can be more comprehensive and that it can include way more, things that we're working on as far as functional communication, academics, social skills, independence, and motor skills. So what might you else include in this activity matrix? Because as you can see, it can become a lot of different things depending on the individual student and the student needs. You might want to put in specific target behaviors in there that you're working on, or specific prompts. When we use this in classrooms, we have the level of prompting that's expected for whoever's working with that student and how to fade that. You might have the specific chosen strategies and additional implementation plans. Might have naturally occurring reinforcers for the learner and data collection methods. And so, in the school, we're going to use this, but we have registered behavior technicians right in there. We have instructional paraeducators in there. We have teachers, we have related service providers. And so, we can make an activity matrix, which is a triple LUTs, because we have all of these experts to do the implementation. But now we need to really think about how we're going to do this in the home. And one of the most important things for the development of an activity matrix is really to designate a case manager to organize the IEP team collaboration. We like to use Google Docs. I think everybody likes those as a collaborative tool where we can go in and, work actively, and multiple people can go in and put updates in and new things and inform everyone. However, the hard copy is always important to have, and we use it and refer to it throughout the day. We make notes on it, we collect data on it, etc. So now we have school closure and we have a parent who is implementing probably very sophisticated IEPs that were, pretty in-depth and had multiple IEP goals. And so your role as the case manager or the case manager on your team is really to start off with scheduling a very convenient time to meet with the caregiver to actually first describe and explain the activity matrix. It's important that we convey to them during this time that we understand multiple members of the student's IEP team. And we know there's usually a cast of thousands, and they may have all been reaching out to them individually to offer their supports and services that are designated in the IEP, all with good intentions to help the family, help the child, and really make sure that IEP gets implemented during school closures. However, our role now as a case manager and someone communicating is say, we get that might be pretty overwhelming. And we'd like to suggest that the activity matrix is a tool that can actually help coordinate all of these well-intentioned coordinated efforts. So Amber went over these last week, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but what we want to do is to continue to tie together the information that we're providing you in this ECHO series, but to continue to remember that caregiver coaching process. Is that we're actually collaborating with the caregiver. We're not giving them stuff to do, but we're collaborating and speaking with them just so that we can teach them the strategies and work collaboratively together so that we can get some of the skills addressed in the home as appropriate. As a case manager, remember again this tool that Amber talked to you about last week, that it gave you a lot of good information. This is from the Parent Implemented Intervention Strengths and Areas worksheet. It's something you would have done before you've had that conversation about the activity matrix. It's going to give you information about, you know, what works, what doesn't work. And so this can be a foundational tool to help you have that first conversation about the activity matrix. And so once you've, kind of sold this activity matrix tool, and the caregiver says, yeah, I think I'll give it a try. What we want to do is spend time talking about that family schedule and what it looks like and what are best times of day, and especially what is manageable and doable. Amber talked last week and had a really nice picture of the turtle and the hare. You know, go slow to go fast, start small to grow big. When we implement this in schools, we really start with really the first one scheduled event and maybe doing 1 or 2 IEP goals within that. So we start really small, and then we add the communication, and then we add the social skills, and then we add the fine motor until we can really have a sense of, oh, in this one activity, I now know how to integrate all of those. And so it's important, especially now with the school closures, that we help the parent, you know, start off really small and very successfully. And it's important when you're having that conversation to really look at what's essential, what's relevant, what's important to this caregiver. And that's going to be responsive to them, not make them feel like this is one more big, huge thing that they have to do. And it certainly gets their buy-ins if we're really starting off with what's really super important to them and is going to have the biggest bang for our buck. So when you develop this working draft of the activity matrix, work with your with your IEP team and say, okay, here's the schedule. This looks like it's doable and manageable. These are the best times of day. And then you work together to find out how can these IEP goals match and put them in an activity matrix. And remember, less is more. Simple is going to get it done. Start small to go big. And then what you'll do is schedule a time to meet with the caregiver to review the rough draft and say, how does this look? Does this look like too much? And this is the document that you'll use that will be the foundation for your consultation. I wanted to say one more thing. The activity matrix, it's PDF fillable, it's a Word doc, it's a PDF, it's all kinds of stuff on the Captain website. The one question I get a lot about the activity matrix is, shouldn't we have a column for behavior? And my answer is typically no. What we want to do is infuse the behavioral, what you're aware of about behavior within the context. So we're going to use those antecedent based interventions, meaning we're going to make sure these activities have lots of special interest, that we're going to have the choice making there so that we reduce power control. We're going to make sure that when you go from one preferred activity to the other, that it's highly preferred, that you're going to go from a lower preferred to a higher preferred activity. And so we're going to build in to your daily schedule in the activity matrix. It doesn't mean you might not have token reinforcers, but when you look at the naturalistic instruction, it talks about using natural behavioral reinforcers that are naturally occurring within these contexts. But again, it's individualized. However, having a separate behavioral column feels too over there. And so if you're going to really address specific behaviors, integrate them into each activity. So after they finish this, they put a check on their token board, or, you know, they get to have a choice between 2 free time activities. So here's the Affirm module for naturalistic intervention that you can refer to. Okay, so we're going to move on to the schedules, and we're going to do our last poll. And I'm going to go and launch poll number 3. Here we go. How many of your students with ASD have an individualized visual schedule? So, all of your students have a personal schedule? Only some of them. Very few of mine have a personal schedule. And my students with autism actually don't even need a personal schedule. Okay, I think it stopped moving, so I'm going to share the results with you. So it looks like about 35% of you Has all of your students have a personal schedule? 53% says only some of them, and very few of your students have a personal schedule. Okay, so we're going to move into visual schedules pretty quickly. And I'm going to be flexible because it seems to freeze every time we do a poll. So we will zip back in here. So how do we help our students understand the benefits of a visual schedule? So when we look at our parents and our caregivers, one thing we can do to help them understand, because it's probably going to feel like, oh man, you've got the activity matrix, and now you want me to do this schedule, and we don't have a schedule in our home. However, we can share and collaborate and have an opportunity to discuss that the research really does tell us that when our students have predictable schedules and routines and visual supports, that they really do benefit. And that several of the outcomes is that it will increase their independence. And I think most parents would go, oh, good. It's going to support easier transitions. That's one of the things I hear a lot from our families is, getting my child to go from here to there is really tough. That the research tells us that using a schedule really increases the understanding of verbal information. And as a speech language pathologist, I'm always promoting, pair the visual with the verbal. Our students with autism, we know one of the inherent deficit areas is processing verbal information. And so the schedule offers us a natural opportunity to show the visual as we give them the directive. And we also know that it actually reduces anxiety, because when our students know what's going to happen next, they're going to do a little bit better. So as an educator, you're going to collaborate with that family caregiver using all those amazing strategies Amber taught us last week. And we're going to keep in mind, and I think this is going to be the hardest for all of us, is you guys had this great schedule that was working super well in the school, but that may not work in the home. And so we have to be flexible as well to say, okay, that might have worked there, but I think we have a different context. And to collaborate with that caregiver to make sure that the schedule they have is really easily understood and completely meaningful to the student. Now is not the time to teach a student what a symbol means. What we really need to do is make sure if they need a more concrete type of schedule, or they can manage a more abstract schedule, that we choose the right one that works right now in the moment. We're going to discuss with that caregiver how, if it's easily comprehended, that we have to pay attention to their comprehension level, how many they could sequence at a time, their attention span, and you'll collaborate and work with them about all these different characteristics. And it may be even in the home, our higher functioning kids may need a single event presented at a time. When we're in the class, I call that a teacher as schedule, where I just bring that schedule and I go, time for snack. And it grabs their attention, it helps them, and it kind of gives them some confidence about, I know what's happening now. But we also have those other students who want to know exactly what's going to happen all day long, and they need that so that they have less anxiety. We're going to actually collaborate with the caregiver on that daily schedule so that we're paying close attention that we're not going to go from the iPad to writing if writing isn't a preferred activity. And so we'll help the parent understand about how to support transitions when we're developing that schedule. And we're going to encourage them to display that schedule so that it's visible and that it gets updated every day. That is something to do we're going to have to talk about and say, yeah, I know. However, in the morning when you review the schedule, it needs to pretty much reflect what's going to happen. And that we want to review that schedule throughout the day, and that's going to depend on the student. We're going to do it just in the morning, or we're going to do it halfway through the day, or at the end of the day, or all the time. And then what's important that we help share with our families is that designing a way to indicate when something's finished is very rewarding in itself for lots of our individuals with autism. And so what's going to be easiest, whether it's going to be a check mark or turning over the icon or removing it, putting it in a finished area. And if our students using an object schedule, that they put it in the bin. We may not want to use the check mark for the student who, if he doesn't make the check mark perfect, perfectly, he erases for 10 minutes. And so we have to talk about what's going to be most effective, efficient, and easy. But it's a nice way for our students to feel. And those are the kind of things we're going to be sharing with caregivers. Now, we know that you make schedules and you know schedules and you're all experienced educators. This information is for you to share with the caregivers to show them that there's actually a continuum, so that we want to make and design this schedule to be the most effective, starting with a real object. And then we're going to maybe move to a photograph, and we'll have color icons or those Meyer-Johnson picture symbols, then the black and white icons, and then the most abstract would be the written word. And in your resources, we've put all of the continuum in there. And these are just a sample of what you're going to find in that resource bundle in the box. These are actual objects. That diaper means I'm going to put a diaper on. This next level is a little bit more abstract, and it's called an associated object schedule. And sometimes when I, consult, they say, oh, the object schedule is not working. And I said, well, that's an associated object. That little tiny pink chair right here it means to you that they're going to go over to circle where all the other big chairs are, but they don't know what that means. So we're going to have to figure out another way to help them understand that. So this is a little bit more abstract, and it's important for us to be able to share with parents why some schedules may not be working. Then we have the photo schedules, and then we also have the picture symbol schedules, and pairing that printed word, as I talked about earlier, really does support reading acquisition, and especially that reading comprehension. This is something else that's important that we want to help parents understand, is that sometimes we're going to have a combination. Sometimes they'll understand these picture symbols, but they'll still need the photo to help them understand other different events. And it's just because cognitively we don't just all of a sudden go from one ability to the next seamlessly, and it's not that well defined. So having a combination schedule is okay, and we help parents understand that. Then we have the black and white icons, which are way more abstract than those colored picture symbols. And then finally, way more abstract and the most is the written word. Patty's going to go over these next week and talk about other visual supports. We just want to make sure on this daily schedule that if there's a change, that the parent needs to understand that we have to, the student will do better if we give them a little bit of warning, and we have to have some strategies, whether it's a little post-it note of schedule change, or even change alert, instead of this, we're going to do this. And we do that ahead of time. For the students who read, we might use these post-it arrow flags that say change, and that we let them know ahead of time as we review that schedule first thing in the morning. The visual supports, a FIRM module is very, very, very good. And then these are additional resources that can help you, and you can help share with the parents, when you're collaborating to develop these schedules.